Welcome to Season 2 of Time and Materials, a construction-only podcast powered by livecost.com, where we sit down with interesting people doing interesting things in construction. These construction experts kindly give us their time so that you can walk away with the tools to make better day-to-day decisions in your construction career. Okay, Harrison, we're up and running. You're very welcome to the Time and Materials podcast. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks so much, Kieran. Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. Best place to kick these off with is try and give people an understanding, a bit of context to your background. So where you come from, what was life like growing up for you? And I suppose, how did you end up here, I suppose, in Ireland?
Yeah, sure. I guess I was born in Australia, and I probably took the longest route possible to get from Australia to Ireland. I grew up in a house that my parents built themselves. Neither of them were builders. My mum was a bookkeeper and my dad was a sailor. And I started working in construction and hospitality, whichever one was paying the most at the time, from the age of 16 in Australia. I started traveling and working in different projects around the world. So the first place I went to was Kenya, where I was meant to spend a couple of months there and help with the construction of a primary school in a village. And I ended up spending a year there and doing about 6 different projects throughout the year in different communities around Kenya. And then I came back to Australia and I worked in construction for another year, paid off all my debts from living in Africa for a year, and then really wanted to get on the road again. And so I went to India again. I was meant to be there for 2 months, and I was just connecting with people and seeing where I could be helpful. And I always, because I had experience in building, I always fell into building and doing construction projects and managing different construction projects, and kind of bringing communities together became a really big part of that role in the early years when I was working on these different projects, and kind of getting everyone surrounding one goal and one need, and so we could all work together. I ended up spending 2 years in India, so I overstayed my 2 months many times over, and then onwards and onwards, I kept traveling, and I basically, look, after India, I went back to Australia and I went back into conventional construction, being what was normal in Australia at the time, which was timber frame, a lot of red brick, and I was just so bored, to be honest. I was so bored of building the exact same thing again and again and using the exact same techniques. And I had had a little taste of all the different ways that you can actually build buildings and build structures from my few years abroad there. And so I kind of hit the road again, and I went to find as many different building techniques and building teachers and places that were teaching different ways of building as I could. And that kind of took me all over the world. That took me to Asia, to the United States, down to South America. And then I was going off and doing my work, and I just kept coming back to Ireland. Something kept pulling me back here. I think I was at this age where I think a lot of people naturally in their late 20s, they're ready to create their own home and create their own space. And by the 3rd time that I was coming back to Ireland, I was looking for an old cottage to buy. And the one that I found, the one I ended up buying, was out in County Clare, just outside of Ennistymon. And for me, 5 acres with 3 stone ruins on it, 10 minutes from the ocean, it's like a dream. I thought I was buying a castle. We don't have any stone buildings in Australia. They're all much newer than that. And the fact that I could buy what to me is a work of art, these old ruins that had lasted hundreds of years, and start to work and experiment on that. And so that's how I ended up in County Clare in Ireland, and now I'm stuck here.
I know the feeling of going somewhere and thinking that it'll be a short journey. I've actually, interestingly, I've gone the opposite direction to you. I spent 9 years in Australia. So went over there, recently qualified. I'm a carpenter by trade, so went over there, recently qualified, and said I'll do it a year and see how things work great here at the time, and see how that goes, and end up staying for 9. So Interesting. So how do you go from that, which is an interesting story, and I'm sure there are lots of stories within all those different countries and settings that you worked in. I'm sure loads to get into there. But what most people would be interested in, how do you land the gig with RTE? How do you go from that to landing the TV show? How did all that come about?
Yeah, sure. I guess it's important to know I was very, very it wasn't something that attracted me at all, or that was something I was striving for. When I was working for Earthship Biotecture, I was teaching a lot. I was teaching a lot of people how to build, and it was kind of casual at first, and then it became more formal, and then it became actual classes, and I was developing classes to explain how buildings work and how materials work, how heat works within buildings, and so I started kind of building these classes. And when I met my partner here in Clare and we got pregnant with our first daughter, who's now 3, I decided that I wasn't going to travel anymore and I wasn't going to be working abroad anymore. And I just wanted to be here. I wanted to be here for my daughter arriving. And so I decided to start teaching those classes here. And so I just put it out on my Instagram, which, at the time had 200 followers, and it was not a thing that was a big part of my life at all. But I said, basically, I guess, sorry, before I get into that, like I had been building other people's homes here in Ireland every time I came back, building projects for people, doing extensions, building kitchens, staircases, whatever, jobs wherever I could in between my work abroad. And I was really starting to get tired of that work and of that relationship that seemed to be coming back again and again, where I would go and I'd pour my heart and soul and all my energy into a project for clients who were, sometimes satisfied or sometimes 50% satisfied. And I wasn't leaving really satisfied at the end of the day. And I didn't always feel like the work was getting valued as much as I really wanted it to be. And I thought there was something more useful that I could offer to people than just going and building these bespoke pieces for clients. So I put it out on my Instagram that I was willing to teach anyone who wanted to come the fundamentals of building so that they could start thinking about taking on their own projects, right? That I could explain to them how structures work and how buildings work. And they could start just thinking about, considering if that was something they wanted to learn more about. And so that first course I ran, we called it Build School, and it was 6 people around my breakfast table. And I just talked about building. I would spend 4 hours in the morning talking about building. And then in the afternoon, we would go outside and we'd put into practice all the things I talked about. It was very informal, very casual. But those 6 people told 3 friends each, and then 3 friends each. And then within a year, I had a waiting list of like 60 people wanting to come and just start to understand how buildings work.
What would be the typical profile of someone that wants to, generally someone that turns up to your course?
Yeah. So at the beginning, right, it was people who just like me. It was people in their late 20s, early 30s who wanted to have their own house or already had inherited a house or bought a wreck or something and wanted to start doing some of the work, but couldn't afford to pay someone else to do it. Just really, it was just cost was the main barrier. And so they saw that paying 500 euros to come and just get a deep dive understanding of how these things work would kind of set them on a path to deciding if this was something they could take on themselves or if it was something they would rather just save up and pay professionals to come in and do for them. These days, we've now turned that program into a non-for-profit called Common Knowledge. And we're sold out until July already. We'll teach over 600 students this year the fundamentals of building. And our profile has grown hugely, or our range of participants, the demographics that we kind of reach has grown hugely, broadened hugely. So now we have 55% females coming on the course. We've got 15% LGBTQ people. So what we're really finding, and sorry, we have a huge range of men in their kind of 30s to 40s, and it's curious that demographic still comes because they're the ones who if we were to stereotype, they're the ones who, in theory, should know this stuff. You know, they're the right demographic. They look like builders. They sound like builders. They often talk like builders when they're in a pub having a conversation with each other. But there's a lot of men who are a similar age to me who are, I guess, feeling like they're realizing now that the career path they chose hasn't actually set them up to be able to secure shelter for themselves or
And
create
are
shelter.
they? Do you find they're investigating whether this could be a career change, or is it more so that you think that they could test the boundaries of how far they can actually go with doing some own work on their own places?
Yeah, I don't think anyone who's coming to my course is coming to look at a career change, because we're not giving certificates. We are not trying to certify people. We're not trying to kind of progress people's careers or anything like that. We're really teaching the fundamentals of so many different skills. It's entry level across the board to all these different things. Though in saying that, I've had practicing engineers and architects and builders all come on the course, and by day 3, they're saying they've learned more than they did in 4 years of college or an apprenticeship or whatever they were doing. And so we're teaching something a little bit different to how it's traditionally been taught, where we're not dogmatic about the certain type of building that we should be building, or the certain type of materials that we should be using. We're really trying to give people all the tools and all the information so that they can make their own decisions about what the house they want to live in, what kind of space do they want to create, and what kind of materials do they want to use. And all we're doing is just equipping people with the knowledge so they can actually make those decisions or have educated conversations with their builders or with their contractors. And realistically, of the 600 people who come this year, I would expect 50 to 60 of them to go away and actually build something after the course, about 10%. About
Where do
70%
you
of them will
where
still
where
contract a builder to come and do the work. And they came on the course really just to be able to have conversations with their builder and know what they're talking about. Actually ask for things that are achievable rather than daydreaming and then trying to be understood and failing to be understood. And then 30% are really just coming to take a break from the real world, from their real life, and do something they've never done before and learn how to use some tools.
where do you draw the line when it comes to the fundamentals? Like, for example, if it comes to structural stuff, plumbing, electrics, are you teaching the basics there, or is there part of the course we say there's certain elements of construction that we just shouldn't touch?
Oh, no, no. So we teach the basics of everything. So we don't draw the line around what we teach, but what we encourage people to take on themselves. We're not telling anyone to do their own plumbing or their own electrics or to design the engineering of their structures, because legally that's going to be a barrier for them anyway. There's no point encouraging people to do that, because down the line, they're not going to be able to get their house insured. They're not going to be able to get a mortgage. Those things will be barriers if they try to take on those tasks themselves. But we teach them everything. I teach them how the engineering of a building works. I teach them about load disbursement, and I teach them kind of how the electrics in their house work, how we generate electricity, how we move it around the house, what a fuse board is, what it's doing, just so that they have an understanding. But we don't encourage anyone to go and wire their own house, and we don't teach them enough that they even could go and wire their
Yeah.
own house. It's really the fundamental principles at the base of all of this, just so that they can join the conversation and have an active voice, because in the end, it's their house. We want them to be involved in it.
Yeah, no, I mean, that makes sense. Tell us about the book, Build Your Own. What was this vision behind that? And was that targeted at the same sort of people that are coming towards the course?
Yeah, absolutely. So initially, the idea of the book was, sorry, and this ties into your question before that I didn't answer. And initially, the idea of the book was that it was going to be a textbook for the course, right? It was going to be basically a written version of what I'm teaching on the course. But when the TV show happened, right? And so the way that happened was a production company reached out to me who make another TV show called DIY SOS. And they asked me if I would come on DIY SOS and offer an alternate opinion, maybe some different ideas about how they might solve some problems or approach some things around the house. And I said no to that because it didn't really, I think I'd already kind of decided what I was doing at that point was about teaching people and about empowering owner builders to start learning some of this stuff. And I didn't see how it was going to feed that. You know, it seemed like I'd be going off and doing this thing, but it wouldn't actually be feeding the new project that I was working on. But the production company, as production companies are, were persistent, and the conversation kept going, and kind of the angle kept changing more and more. And after 3 months of emails and phone calls back and forth, they basically just asked me, what would you make a show about? You know, what you're doing is so unique and interesting and different. Like, what story do you see happening? And so I basically laid it out that the only show I'd be excited and energized to make is one where people are building their own homes. And I'm there giving them advice, giving them help, teaching them to use tools, you know, giving them a shoulder to cry on when everything goes wrong, or when people at the hardware store send them out and don't help them, or whatever it is. And that's the show we ended up making. And the book, because the show was coming out, suddenly the book got some interest. This textbook that was really going to be fairly dull and not nearly as coffee table friendly as it ended up becoming, needed to appeal to a wider audience. And I'm really glad that we did push the boundaries on the book, because it could have been a pretty dull textbook that would never have reached or inspired anyone. But the impact that the book's had now is so kind of inspiring. It's so amazing to get these emails from people who are flicking through this thing and suddenly feeling like they could try out, they could experiment with these little things, they could try doing something on a small scale, and then it's just encouraging people to learn a bit more and to trust themselves in their ability to learn. And I think that's what's coming out the most for me in all this work that we're doing now, between Common Knowledge, the TV show, the book, all of this, is that there is this huge issue of learned helplessness across Ireland, where the general population have they don't believe that we're able to do many things anymore. We've all become so hyper specialized in the one thing that we do, and every other part of our life gets subcontracted out, that we don't actually even try to learn things anymore. And I really think that's the thing that I'm doing now, is I'm really just addressing this issue, this loss of agency that's come from this issue of learned helplessness. And it's all about getting people to believe that they can learn again, and then they have to put in the work and actually learn the thing and actually try things out. And they're gonna fail every now and then. They're gonna mess it up, and they're gonna need help, and they're gonna need to fix it. But we all did when we started building. You know, every one of us. Like, I started sweeping floors on construction sites, and I remember those first major mistakes that I made, that the whole site would be laughing at me for some huge issue I'd done. And that's how you learn. But
I'm sure you've come across the tradesman, the builder, who says, you know, it takes years to become a professional carpenter, plumber, electrician, and it's unrealistic to think a homeowner could actually take on the job of the trades. What's your comments to that? Like,
well, I'm not trying to create professionals in any capacity whatsoever. I'm trying to help people create shelter for themselves, by whichever means they could. If I could just give everyone the money they needed to pay the builders to do it, even that wouldn't solve the problem, because there aren't enough builders to actually service the needs of the country as it is right now. I would love if there were more builders, more tradesmen across Ireland who could actually help everyone out. But the reality is, for most of these people, they don't actually see it as a possibility to engage professional tradesmen in doing their projects, either because they can't reach them or they can't afford them. And that's a huge issue. And it doesn't need to be that extreme. It doesn't need to be, there is one way to build a house, or you don't have a house. You have to rent for the rest of your life. There's this sliding scale. And you know, 2 generations ago, most people knew how to fix something when it broke in their house. Most people knew how to build a small thing that they needed on their house. And we've lost that. And that's because of this learned helplessness. That's because we've all become hyper specialized and are afraid to do anything that we might then be responsible for fixing afterwards. And so I've been building for 16 years, and there's no way I expect anyone on a 1-week course with us to learn any small percentage of what I've learned over the last 16 years. But what we need to be doing as a community is sharing these stories, sharing these learnings so that we keep evolving to a better place, rather than holding all this information, all this experience, all these techniques secret and then charging people for it. You know, that's not leading us to being a stronger, more resilient Ireland. That's leading us to being a completely dependent Ireland that's waiting for other people to solve all our problems rather than doing it ourselves. And, you know, generally my experience with all the tradesmen I've encountered since doing the show and even on the show is no one's actually said that to me, that these people shouldn't be doing this. You know, everyone has been really positive and really excited. That I think in some way a lot of tradesmen out there feel a little more understood when a client is now having to do something that they've been asking tradesmen to do for the past decade. And a lot of the time, these ideas that clients come up with are unrealistic or unachievable or way too expensive. And because there's no good communication between clients and builders, we have this gap that ends up with us either creating things or clients not being happy, or things costing way more than they need to, or being much harder to build than they need to. And the more that we can start empathizing with each other, the more that builders can empathize with clients, and the more that clients can empathize with all the tradespeople that they're engaging with, then that communication is going to get better. We're going to start building cheaper houses, more accessible houses, and easier spaces for us to make sure that everyone's got shelter.
I mean, having the fundamentals to be even able to have the conversations with the trades that you will require is brilliant, isn't it? You think about it, because, you know, there's a lot of that. It goes on in the industry. There's no hiding it. That, you know, are the guys having me on here? Like, it looks like a small body of work. It's been priced up for what looks like a bit of overkill, that type of stuff. But being able to sort of hold that conversation and have a deeper understanding of how long things could potentially take and the issues with doing a certain body of work, whether it be in the trades or whatever it might be, is usually valuable. Where can people find out about these courses and find out more about you and the Common Knowledge Centre?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, I mean, I'll be making more TV shows, and I'll be doing that kind of stuff as well. And I've got my own website, which is harrisongardner.net. But everything we do with the teaching and the skill sharing and kind of empowering people is done through our social enterprise Common Knowledge. And the website is ourcommonknowledge.org. And you'll see everything that we're doing there. We've actually just acquired 50 acres of land up in the Burren. That's where I am now. And we're moving the entire business up here. We're building classrooms and workshops and everything to be able to host people and really make it an amazing experience for people. So we're pretty excited to be up here now.
Absolutely brilliant, Harrison. I wish you all the best with it. It's great work that you're doing, and we'll certainly look closely and follow your journey as it goes on. So thanks very much for your time. Appreciate you coming on.
Thanks so much, Kieran. Appreciate it.
Time and Materials is brought to you by Livecost, the construction software fully designed to manage your construction financial forecasts. Visit livecost.com to take a product tour, or reach out to our team of construction cost experts to transform your project profits. Any links mentioned during this episode, including speaker profiles or any other resources, are available on the podcast show notes. Your feedback is also welcome. We would really appreciate if you could take a moment to leave us a review or email your comments, guest suggestions to hello@timeandmaterials.com. Finally, if you haven't done so already, please don't forget to subscribe. Thank you for listening. Until next time, I'm your host, Kieran Brennan.